So we will continue with our discussion today, and I'd like for you, again, to be very active. Continue to using the Twitter hashtag, which is hashtag EIF15, and also using the app, which you got the invitation for yesterday in your inboxes at 3:30. And this app will allow you to respond to polls, to surveys, to post pictures, and basically, if you're in the top 3, you will make it to the gala dinner tonight, so maybe check it out. Also, for those who are at home maybe, thanks for following us, having continually followed us today on the live streaming. It's still available and it's still on the homepage of the Martens Center website. And finally, I'd like to thank Rafa Sanudo, who sketched all day and will continue to do so in our last discussion. Again, to ensure the liveliness of our debates, we have totems all around the room. These totems are here to indicate to our speakers that they have 3 minutes tops to make their points come across to you, the audience, so that we can then open the debate. Voilà. And I'd like to present our moderator, Erika Widegren, Executive Director of Atomium Culture.
Well, thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here to moderate the discussion on innovating Europe's business ecosystem, Industry 4.0, and the digital revolution with such a wonderful panel. Industry 4.0, the industry, the Internet of Things, or the Internet industry. There's a lot of buzzwords running around about this at the moment, which show that this is a very pressing issue and that is being debated in all different forms, and there's a lot of concerns that are coming up. For those that have been here all day, you know that the digital has been a big topic on discussion today. And I think it's very relevant to really look at what is the role and what can Europe do here. It's been said several times that an Industry 4.0 is for the taking in Europe. It's a 30 trillion euro industry, which is almost 50% of the global economy. This is what the estimates are. Vice President Ansip has mentioned significantly the potential for increasing the flexibility, the efficiency, the productivity, and the competitiveness, and help create new jobs. This, of course, is also one of the reasons why this is such a debated issue. Commissioner Oettinger underlined that the fourth industrial revolution will change all our industries and will change our economy and will change our lives. So these are some of the topics we will touch upon during this afternoon's, the last debate this afternoon. And I would like to introduce the distinguished panel that is here to help me discuss these things. First of all, our kickoff speaker, Carlos Moedas, who's Commissioner for Research, Science and Innovation. We have MEP Michal Boni, who is also the founder of the Intergroup on the digital agenda for Europe. We have MEP Eva Paunova, who's one of the youngest members of the European Parliament and whose recent work has been on the digital single market and in particular on digital security. From industry, we have Mr. Karim Lesina, who's the Vice President for International External Affairs at AT&T, and Thomas Spieler, Vice President for Public Policy at the Walt Disney Company. So I'd like to give the floor to Commissioner Moedas to introduce the topic and to set some of the key points that we'll be discussing later today.
Thank you very much. I'm probably going to get up so people can see me. No, thank you very much. It's a very nice setting. I hope that I don't get dizzy of going around my head, but I'll try to do so. I was looking at the panel and I was looking at the 3 words or the 3 keywords that you have in terms of digital, ecosystem, and Industry 4.0. And I was thinking really what has been my last year as the Commissioner for Research, Science and Innovation was actually to get to the conclusion that I have a brother, which is the Digital Commissioner and the Vice President also for Digital, Mr. Ansip and Mr. Oettinger. And why? Because I think that the digital world and the digital revolution have had and will have a major impact in innovation and science. So everything that we used to have is actually about to change because we are in a digital world. And you ask me, but why and when and where? And I think that really if you think about innovation in science 200 years ago and today, you see that the way we do science, the way we innovate today is very different from then. And the three reasons that I found that are really striking about that is one, that in this digital era, what you have is actually the user on the driving seat of innovation. That will be the first characteristic of this new era. And I'll have a word about that. The second is that you can have very small players, people that create their own companies, and then they just become big very quickly. So something must be happening. And third, you are at a point with a digital revolution that you can actually have really groundbreaking innovations that actually create new markets, create transactions that before didn't exist. But let's start by the first one, which I think is probably one of the major changes in the last 50 years. We all were born with this idea, and those that studied economics, that Schumpeter would say that basically you would have the producer we have R&D system, will have a marketing service, and would push innovation into the user. And the user would just get it, and get it over it, and get the new product. The digital world actually has changed that paradigm, because actually the user can tell very quickly to the producer what he really wants. And so it's not about the producer pushing, but it's actually a loop that actually comes back to the producer. And that is happening in science, and I know that Erika was telling me about what I think about the revolution in science and in innovation. In science, it's happening because you can do science without being a scientist, right? I mean, you have a boy with 16, 17 years old in the US called Jack Andraka that you never really got to university. He's probably now in university, and he was able to discover a technique to get a real diagnostic of pancreatic cancer. And they asked him, so, I mean, how did you get there? And he said, I mean, I'm in love with it. I'm passionate about it. And I've been watching YouTube since I was 6 years old about this subject. And so I got there. So, I mean, this is really something that it's very unique. I mean, you don't need to go to the formal education, and you can actually do science. This is quite new in the past 50 years. Then, I mean, I think the most impressive example that I've seen myself, and I was trying to look to the time, if there's a watch, so I don't go too far. I was thinking about the other day that I was in Lisbon, actually handing in a prize called the Patient Innovation Award. And that was, for me, a defining moment, because I saw this man that was now, it's a British person in his 60s, and 20 years ago he was actually diagnosed with a very difficult syndrome called the Martens syndrome, which means that his vessel, the aorta vessel, was so weak that it could burst. And so he was an engineer, a boiling engineer. And the doctors told him, look, there's really nothing we can do about it. If it bursts, you probably have 6 months, 1 year. And he came home and he said, I have to solve this. I'm a boiling engineer. I have to find a way. And so he found his own way. He created a protection for the aorta valve. And basically now, there's already around 150, 200 people that have the same system that was invented by an engineer. Have you ever, in your lifetime, the ones that are probably of my generation, seen doctors talking to engineers? Probably not. Have you seen actually a world or basically these new things happen in the intersections and don't happen in the discipline itself? I think that's the world of digital. And when you think about that, it's very interesting. Yesterday I was watching a person, really documentary on a guy called Walter Isaacson that wrote a lot of biographies, and he was telling about Steve Jobs, and that when he was very young, he basically decided with the father to build a fence around his place. It's actually in its biography. And there was a part of the fence that nobody could see, and the father said, look, it has to be perfect. You have to paint it. It has to be really perfect. And he said, why? Nobody's going to see it. And the father said, but you will know about it. And so when they were doing Macintosh, the engineers were actually putting the chips inside, and Steve Jobs looked at it and said, look, but the chips are not aligned. The microchips are not aligned. This is ugly. Yeah, but nobody's going to see it. And he said, but you will know about it. You know, and so it's really about being really the attention to detail, but also the intersection in between the disciplines. Second, on the openness to really the new players. I think here there's really a big change with digital, because, you know, we always remember that when we were young, you would study to have a profession, then you'll set up your own business, and it would take you 20 years, 25 years to actually get your business off the ground, sell your business, and eventually make money. Today, with the digital, you actually can capture value from above. You can come and just get that value out of that industry without really knowing the industry. That's what Spotify did. I mean, Spotify was not really a company with music skills or people that knew a lot about the music industry. And so you see that it's very easy in the digital world to have a difference in between the value creation and the value capture, and you can capture that value. And when you really look at Europe, you see we have to do something about it. Because when you see cases like Tesla, for instance, Tesla is capturing value on the automobile industry, an industry that they had absolutely no knowledge about it. So why? Why is that? Why are they able to do it? And when you see that 2 or 3 weeks ago, they were able to update the software through Wi-Fi, and you basically get a new car with new potential self-driving skills, then something is really changing, and we have to be sure that we actually can grasp that opportunity. And third, and just to finalize, I think that the third pillar of these changes is actually what Clayton Christensen calls the market-creating innovations. And that's, and probably you've talked about it today, that's what you see with Uber and Airbnb. And you can take a vision or take a negative way on looking at it and thinking, no, you have to be fair, you have to be taxed, and you have to do everything to have in a fair environment. But these companies are creating really a very different environment. They are creating markets that were not there before. And so they are creating transactions that did not exist. So this is positive for the society. And we have to grasp these opportunities. And so that's what we want to do. And that's what I want to actually in these 5 years, to actually get off the ground if I can. And so I thought that these 3 points will be interesting for our starting point. And so, Erika, thank you very much. And now I hope that you have food for thought.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to pick on the point that you mentioned about the disruptiveness of the digital and how it is changing the paradigms of every other relationship that is currently existing and how this is affecting. And I'd like to pass a question on to Mr. Boni about how this huge disruption, how is the work of the Parliament and what can the Parliament do to support the very practical implications that this disruption is having?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you very much, Commissioner, for your inspiring intervention at the beginning of this debate. I fully agree that this is a new paradigm, and this is a paradigm in which we need to consider what is the role of users. Users means consumers. Users means prosumers. Users mean citizens, and so on and so on. And I think that it is important because this is really the economy on demand. So we are at the center of this economy, and the second dimension of this is related to possible personalization of many products and personalization of many services. This is a completely new paradigm for the economy and for our life. What we need to make, and what do we need to do for better conditions for this new paradigm development and Industry 4.0 growth in Europe. Firstly, we need infrastructure. We need infrastructure with a fast internet, which is very important, because when we will talk about Industry 4.0 when we will talk on possible traffic management and reactions in milliseconds, so we need 5G. We need to continue and implement in Europe 4G, but we need to start our exploration for 5G between researchers, between business in Europe, and also to fix some frequencies, because it is also very important from 6 giga to 100 giga, because probably those frequencies will be much more adequated to and adjusted to those needs. This infrastructure is also very important, but because when we are talking about industrialization, digital industrialization, we need to understand that we need 5G. So in the Parliament, we need to understand it, and we need to prepare our solutions future-proof, not to discuss only on 700 megahertz allocation, but start to discuss on future solutions. The second point, which is important, is to solve the problem of data-driven economy, which means to solve the problem how to collect data, how to transfer the data, and how to share the data. We are, I think, we will finalize the work on General Data Protection Regulation, and we need to understand that we need data protection, privacy protection, and freedom in the internet, but on the other hand, we need to create conditions for business development. Because when we have started debate on GDPR, it was the relation between users and operators, companies. Now the chain of data processing is much more complicated. This is user, company, next user, next company, next business, and so on. There are many stages, yes, and I think that we need to understand, and we need to adjust legislation to those solutions. It means, of course, that we need to discuss how to better anonymize and use anonymization of the data for making research on the one hand, and on the other hand, to use data processing for better products and better services. And the last point is legislation.
Well, I was thinking we could, because I see the yellow light is flashing, so we'll get back to, I would say, the last point, which we will talk about later. I mean, there's a lot of issues that are being raised, and I think that the complexity of actually setting up an Industry 4.0 setting is obviously very challenging, not at least, of course, there's some discussions that we are having here in Brussels, but at a national level, and the relation, the collaboration at a national level is quite a different thing. And we've been talking about this previously today, about the need to create a common approach in Europe if we want to be competitive at a global scale. And I wanted to ask in particular Eva Paunova about what your opinion is about this in working on these issues.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for having me today. I have to say that I share, not to say almost everything, actually everything that has been said by the previous speakers. And if I can add to what they've said, it would be exactly in this way, because what we discuss here in Brussels, we probably are very much aware of the advantages, of the benefits, of the opportunities the digital single market has to create. But when you go back to member states, it looks a little bit different. Some member states have probably awakened from their digital snooze, but many are still snoozing. And I know the Commissioner has been very active in visiting and traveling across member states, but it would be fantastic if more MEPs, more people that work in the fields of policy can actually go back, speak to governments and parliaments and raise awareness what the digital single market has to offer. What is Industry 4.0? Because when I talk to citizens across Europe, very often they don't understand how can they transform their industry and what benefits they can get. Because if in Europe we are good in the things there are other countries that are better in the internet, but it's probably one idea easier to make your things smart and to make Internet of Things in Europe successfully, just like they're done elsewhere. So one point would be awareness. But even if we have fast broadband and even people are aware, if they don't have the right skills, it would be very difficult for them to adapt in the revolution we are currently living. We have no idea what the jobs of tomorrow would look like, and you all know the estimate of around 1 million people that would be needed in the digital sector by 2020. So even if we put the right legislation in place, where this legislation is necessary or it's not necessary, if we are not prepared as citizens, as consumers, as businesses to face it and to live it fully and embrace it, it would be very difficult to get to the economic benefits we are all aiming at and we are all speaking at, and they're part of our strategies that we are adopting and embracing.
Thank you very much. I think you pointed out the lack of digital skills and the need for digital skills in understanding where we're going and also being ready for this big change that is happening as we go. I'd like to now change the question and look a bit from the industry side, from actually the provider a lot of these technologies. One of the statistics that obviously is brought up very often is that only 1.7% of European industries today make full use of all the advantages of what we would call Industry 4.0. So, Karim, what would you think would be the most important thing that can be done at an EU level to help spur this innovation?
Okay, first let me thank somebody, because I think the Martens Center have done an impressive job. And I really want, I've been following them from day one for the first event in Madrid, where we got blocks every day thanks to an Iceland volcano, if people remember. But this is probably the most interesting I ever saw, and the quality is growing every year. So really, thank you, Mikulas, and thanks the whole team, because you're doing a spectacular job. And, to answer to your question, I think our three first speakers raised some good points. But with Thomas, we decided to be a little provocative. So we are going to be. I think we have an objective in front of us. Do we really want to have Europe as a leader? Okay? So if we want to have Europe as a leader, we need to look where are the bottlenecks. So if we have only 1.7% of, I don't know the statistics, because then at the end, everybody can have the statistic, and we know the statistic, and we can play what we want. But the reality is, we see the product arriving on the market today. We have clients that are requesting us to launch products tomorrow morning. Connected cars, connected fridge, connected what you want. Everything is getting connected. The legislation that is ruling on that are legislation coming probably from the 90s, 2000, 2005, when these things even was not existing. These things started in 2007. But the Internet of Things is something that came, 1, 2 years ago? The reality is that what we need to look at is stop looking at using the legislation of yesterday to regulate something of today and updating that legislation, but start from scratch. We need to have the courage to say, the industry change, the world change, the user, as Commissioner Moedas has clearly said, is not anymore receiving, is dictating what the industry needs to do. My user is able to dictate me what he wants, because if not, he can change, he can move. So the reality is that we need to move from probably a perception of I'm going to regulate everything ex ante, and I'm going to look at regulating things probably a little more ex post. Let's try to be a little more open. And why? And then I finish. Why? Because today, the market is not anymore regional. The market is global. Capital is global. Capital flies where we have the best return. I think I've been repeating this thing like 6,000 times. And if you're not able to find the right framework here, so a future-ready legislation or whatever we wanted to call it, capital will apply something else. And changing is not so difficult, because the thing that I hear most of the time is, it's so difficult to change. But let me give you an example. AT&T decided to go to invest in Mexico a year ago. Probably people would have said 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it's an impossible market where to invest. But the new government came, made a kind of national pact, and changed its legislation from scratch. And have been able to attract huge investments from our side, but also from other companies who are going there. Few months Last example. Brazil understood the same thing. You know, they are in a difficult situation at the moment. But at the same time, announced 2 days ago that they want to change the whole legislation to create a new framework for July of next year. July of next year. Not in 4 year or 5 year time that will take us to do the whole process. And this is the problem. And we can continue later, Mr. Speeder.
But actually, thank you for making my job so much easier with being provocative, and I will be happy to now we're going to have a heated debate, I already see, but I would like to, you mentioned that capital flows where there are opportunities, and of course there's a lot we can do in Europe, but in the past years actually Europe has received most capital in terms of these things than the other parts of the world. So I mean, some things we must be doing right and some things where we must be improving quite a lot. But Thomas, would you like to add something on this point?
Actually, I would. Thanks. First of all, yeah, indeed, thanks to the Martens Center. This looks like a Hollywood studio set, and I feel like Donald Trump is going to walk in at any moment, which would be fun, actually. Anyway, so jokes aside, yes. Well, as long as you have the same hair, that's fine. So yeah, jokes aside, a lot of good things have been said already. But I want to mention, I want to piggyback on two things. First is the user. We see the user indeed is dictating everything, including for, in our case, user as small as 2 years old. When you see those kids of today, 2, 3 years old, who, for them an iPad or a smartphone or tablet is absolutely intuitive, we live in a totally different environment. Because for them, they will grow, they are growing, like Karim's kids, that I happen to know, in a different environment that we grew up. And that is going to dictate totally new environment, and for policymakers as well. Digital single market. This is the buzzword in time. DSM. Okay. Here's my real provocative question. Do we really need new regulation at all? Mm-hmm. Do we need, I mean, this is a real question. Yep. Or it's just like, oh yeah, it's here commission, new project, let's do something. Well, hold on. It's not that simple. There are a number of things that are happening on the marketplace every day. New disruption, new competitors. We all try new business model every single day. Most of them fail. In some cases, we lose our shirts. That's fine. We have other shirts. We can try. But we don't need regulation for that. It's our risk, our gamble, our money, our employees as well, our shareholders. But we need a framework that enables us to take those risks. But what we really need is, and that has been already evoked, is skills. Because if people are not able to use those technologies, well, there's no point. Infrastructure. I mean, I need a guy like Karim, and his company more than him actually, to make sure that there is 5G, there is broadband deployment in Europe, because without that, there is no innovation, because that's actually the core, the root. So, but we need a framework, and I'm not sure that the DSM is thought that way, that enables companies, small, big, disruptors, more classic, to try new stuff. And again, most of what we try will fail. We know that. One anecdote. A couple of years ago, we used to have like a futurology group within the company. Year after year after year, all their predictions were wrong. All of them. So we fired them. Say, well, what's the need of having people? Because obviously you cannot predict the future. Point is that we don't know what in 5 years, in our sector, for instance, who our competitors are going to be, who our partners are going to be. Most likely it's going to be the same people, actually. But what we know is the user is at the center of everything. And in our sector, which, by the way, encompasses online and traditional, think about the amusement park, for instance, people want to see what they want, when they want, on the platform of their choice, at the tariff of their choice. And that's a brand new paradigm. So again, regulation, do we really need something hard and solid? I'm not so sure.
Well, I'd like to pass to the Commissioner for an answer to
No, I mean, no, not at all an answer, but I thought it was so interesting, the conversation. You know that the person that has been studying user innovation for more than 20 years is a professor at MIT called Erika von Hippel. And Erika von Hippel, he started 20 years ago, and no one really believed when he was talking about it. People just thought he was crazy, right? And one of the first examples that he got of user innovation to convince people that something was happening was actually the mountain bike. Because the mountain bike was actually created by the user and not the producer. It was people that were not happy with the traditional bikes, and they started putting some bits and pieces of motorcycles into the bikes. And then the producer said, oh, this is good. So he took the idea from the user and actually starting, and today the mountain bikes are basically 80% of the market. So he got these great examples of really user innovation from very early on. But just on the regulation, because I think that both of you said really what I think, and I've been working a lot with Vice President Timmermans on that in two things. One is really how can you have regulation that is adaptable to the future? Because of what you said. I mean, you create products every day, you regulate, it takes 5 years, and how do you cope with these two things? And today we announced in the circular economy package that was just announced today, an idea that we actually pushed a lot to have there called basically the innovation deals. And one of the very interesting points of that is that we're looking what the Dutch have been doing called the green deals. And there's really in Europe sometimes a difference in between perception and reality. A lot of people, they come to you and they say, no, I can't do it because of regulation. And then you go to the regulation and you read the regulation and you say, look, but that's not what the regulation says. So the regulation is actually much more flexible than you think. But people don't take the risk. They think it's too risky. And even one of the examples that we were talking yesterday was about water testing. And that you found that the directive on water tells you that you should test in a certain way, but also it adds, you can also use alternatives. But no one does the alternatives because they think that they're going to be really caught in trouble with the law. And so I think that if you use the flexibility that is there and that you can have a proper interpretation of the law, I think that you already have a step. And then I think you have to go much further, which is basically to think, how is going to be the regulation of the future? And then you have to convince lawyers that it's not a static business, is a business that actually has to be flexible. And those are really at the day-to-day of what we're trying to do. I don't know if we're going to achieve the results that we want, but it was just to try to reassure you a little bit that we are trying to do about it and trying to solve it.
You know, can I say something? And just to follow up, and I think it's you're raising a great point, and I think what we don't have to forget, and let me use an example of the mobile. GSM was a technology invented in Europe. Okay, it took years to develop, and it was a fantastic technology, but it was a certain period of the history. Then came 2G, 3G, 4G. Okay, 2G, Edge, UMTS, blah blah blah, 3G, 4G, 5G in less than 14 years. So we have been changing technology almost every 2 or 3 years, and this is going to get faster and faster. So the challenge that these three persons have in front of us is huge, because being able to try to find a future-ready, and not future-proof, because as we said, future-proof is impossible, future-ready regulation is almost impossible, because we don't know what is the technology in 5 years' time. We can tell you what is the next cycle of technology, 5G. But after 5G, what it is, and we still don't know today what 5G is, because we're still testing and all the standardization on that. So it's a huge problem. So, you know, I think everybody needs to sit down and to work together to find a solution. Companies have to be responsible, and policymakers also have to be responsible. And I think there is a kind of respect that needs to start coming back on innovation in general. I think too many people have been looking at the lawyer text or the article of the comma or the recital number 4622 or whatever it is. And sometimes we lose or we even afraid people to come here to innovate. That's one of my challenges.
I would like to pass on the word. I also want to, like you said, this is also an inclusive debate, so I will be taking questions from the audience. So if you do have a question, if you catch my attention, I will then mix you in between the different responses. But if you wanted to give us a bit of an insight on the question of framework and some of these issues.
It's obvious that we need framework, but the framework can be regulatory and non-regulatory. And I think that in the competition between technology and legislation, technology will win, because technology is faster, I fully agree. So it means that we need some kind of new view on the legislation. In some areas, we need strong regulations. We need harmonization in Europe, because 28 legal schemes in many areas creates only barriers. But on the other hand, we need to use soft law as guidelines as co-regulation and code of conduct, which is important for business, for users, for academia. So we need to find the new legal vehicle for digital development in Europe. This is not easy because in the European Parliament now we are discussing DSM report, and there are some pressures that, okay, we don't understand what is going on with platforms, so we need new regulation. And we need to avoid this kind of situation because we have legislation in many areas and we need to use and execute existing regulation.
Well, I think that's a very important point. I saw there was a question back there in the audience. We'll see what the audience thinks about.
Hello.
If you can introduce yourself and...
Hello, do you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah?
Okay, so my name is Vladimir, and I want to go with the provocative way. And as a young entrepreneur, I want to say that there's a specific group of businesses which can be used as a tool to actually change the registration, and these are the startups. Because when you're talking about corporation, if I connect with the previous panel when Uber was talking, and when you're talking about multi-billion businesses, it's much hard to actually change the registration for them. But if we have a specific registration for startups, they're the greatest way to actually test the new models, actually to make easier for them to go all around Europe and to test how it's working to have lesser registration or a different one, and then this to be implemented on a higher level and a bigger scale for corporations and multi-international companies. So startups. And I have one question, which is also, how do you see the implementation of currencies, digital currencies like Bitcoin, in this situation? Because I think this could be a game changer in that manner. Thank you.
So Bitcoin and changing paradigms also in that sense, and the special regulation for startups. Perhaps as this was on the side of the provocative, I should launch the question. Eva, would you like to?
Yeah, sure. On startups specifically, because I work a lot on that point. Well, to begin with, in the European Parliament up until a couple of months ago, I don't think there was a single legislative document that we've amended and adopted that specified startups and entrepreneurs. We talked only up until this moment about SMEs, which is good, but we were not speaking about the new wave of people that are coming up and you know, challenging basically the way businesses operate and work. So with a couple of colleagues, including Michal, we are already introducing those sort of words into our legislation. I know that the Commission has come up with a proposal where there is a need of startup legislation, but most importantly, we can take examples of countries that already have startup legislation, such as Italy, and it's working very, very well actually in countries such as Italy. So why not multiply that? And I think certain countries do necessarily need that, because a lot of national governments, and that's going back to my initial point, they don't even know what a startup is. So in order for them to start thinking for European legislation and how they can support it, they should understand what a startup means and how can we support this new sector that's actually, you know, twisting Europe around, can twist probably further Europe around.
I think that we need to understand that there is a difference between small business and startups. Startups require ecosystem and cooperation between academia, between talented people, business, and I think that we need some kind of hubs in many places all over the Europe for accelerating the startups development. So this is one organizational, not legislation point. And the second, we need to have venture capitals, and we need to have money for making investment much more risky. This is important for startups, yes, and I think that we have some possibilities in solutions which were established some months ago, but I think that in Europe we have no strong power powerful system for financial supporting for startups. So not only legislation, but more efforts at the area of organization, money for startups. And we need to understand that for many big companies, startups will be as a complementary brother. Because those companies probably will have many problems with innovation, and startups are the fresh breath for them.
Well, we're talking about startups and we've talked about regulation in general, but I think there's a lot of questions that we wanted to see about the more also Industry 4.0 and where is this running in the overall concern when it comes to questions like data protection, which is something that's currently being debated very much, and that's obviously of very big concern to research, to startups, and to existing players. So perhaps, Karim, you'd like to...
She likes giving me the difficult question. And look, the reality
I'm punishing you for being...
More than let me talk to you more about data protection, more about cross-border data flow. That I think is the main problem here. I think what people are looking for from startups to big multinationals and etc. is how data is going to move from one place to the other, from one jurisdiction to the other. So I think this is the biggest challenge for a company. I think the main word that we need to remember, I'm coming from an entrepreneurial family. One of the biggest problems my cousins who mainly were managing the company is the complexity of bureaucracy. It's the complexity of the taxation system. It's the complexity of doing things outside of your border. The same is on cross-border data flow. What we need to look at is a technology without looking at the national borders. I know it's difficult because we are responsible for our own we are an MP in Italy or in Bulgaria. We're responsible from our country. But the problem is that we need to start looking at it in a different way. Internet has changed obviously the world, but also business is changing the world. Specifically for this. So we need to look at a model where people can start exchanging data, regulated. So you can find intelligent regulation to do it, but without blocking it or creating national border just to create trade problems. Because there are a lot of calls at the moment, specific at the European level, in some companies are using data to try to protect their market instead of looking at the opportunities that they give to us. We have to praise the Commission work and most of the member states on this because they've been able to try to resist the creation of trade barriers. But the reality is that we need to see how we can enhance this cross-border data flow. So I try to look at the positive and not the negative. I like to look at the opportunity and not the risk. If we're able to do that, I think we can move on. We find a solution all the time. The important is start to look at our partners in a positive way and not start to fear every potential little problem that could come. Because there will be every time a little problem. But this is where we have regulators. We don't have to solve everything with an ex-ante legislation. We have regulators to solve those problems. It's not what is a regulator utility if everything is solved at a strict regulation. So for me, the important is to try to look at data as the future. We need to exchange. If not, we're going to have a problem.
I think you mentioned also before that if we want to really achieve the Industry 4.0, we need the investment from industry to come in, to be pumped into research, into the infrastructure, and into taking some of the difficult risks. So, of course, we've been talking about better regulation or no regulation to some extent. Data protection, how we deal. But according to you, what is the key thing that industry would need today to be able to really push for those risks and that investment that we would need to really capitalize on Industry 4.0?
As far as we are concerned, I would say three things. The first thing is indeed facilitating access to capital for those startups. We just launched an incubator fund in London and Amsterdam because, as you said, there is many things we don't have. New technologies, new ideas, we just don't have. So we fund those guys, and ladies, by the way, hoping that they will succeed. And again, we know that we are going to lose some of the money, but that's okay. That's part of the deal. So access to capital is one. Two, enforcement. This has not been mentioned so far. There are lots of rules in Europe today that are badly enforced, just badly enforced. So how, example, consumer protection online. We have people who want to buy stuff online, all right? And they say, sorry, we cannot ship to you because credit card system is different, consumer protection online is different. It's not the wrong language for the contract, whatever. And people do not understand. So for us, it's a lost sale, but people do not understand why they cannot have access to certain things online. And one of them is bad enforcement of consumer protection, of existing rules. So I don't say no new regulation, but start by enforcing what exists already in the single market in general, not only digital. So that's one, that's two. And then three, it's try, as Karim mentioned, data flow is a good example. Look at global issues. It's certain that those are global markets with ups and downs. Brazil 5 years ago was a darling of everybody. Now it's more difficult for them. But capital from companies, we always looking at the best opportunity, but also where the best talents are. And we do still believe a lot in Europe. Great condition, great infrastructure. We just put 1 billion in France. And who puts 1 billion cash in an operation in Europe today? Not that many companies. So we still believe that there is lots that we can do here, but we also believe that there is a lot that could change, and this future-proof, future-looking regulation is absolutely essential because it scares people. My boss is sitting in Los Angeles. When she opened a newspaper or look online on news, a lot of negative sounds from Europe, the crisis and security issue, migration. So our pleas show leadership, but show the right leadership. Really, you have to take measures. Some of them might be unpopular, but leadership will take Europe even further. Some countries, that China, India, they have lots of problems. Rule of law is one, corruption. But they have a vision, and then you can dispute the vision. But then at least they have a vision, and they put it in action. So leadership, I know it has been discussed many, many times, but it's not only the EU, it's mostly member states. And that we are suffering from that.
Delivering a clear vision in order to ensure also the investments, and I assume that is in general. I'd like to take some questions from the audience. We have about 20 minutes, quarter of an hour left of the debate. So if anyone wants to ask a question, otherwise I will continue with, I have a lot of questions that I've already written up here.
Apparently everybody's bored. I think we need to change things here.
Well, better regulation and data. But I wanted to bring up one point, and we were talking about that before, and that's the role of research in this big domain. That's part of the infrastructure, that's part of one of the big things that Europe has always given. Mariana Mazzucato in her Entrepreneurial Europe actually talked about the impact that investment in basic research has had on the development of new technologies and the role of that. And in particular, I got a very scary data the other day from a member of our board who mentioned that in today's world, nearly 70% of the investment in life sciences, which is billions of euros every year, could go to waste because of lack of standardization and the way that you take care of data. And this is obviously a very big number. So I wanted to pass the word to the Commissioner about what is your view here, and how can we continue to make sure that Europe has that research background and foundation on which industry and innovation builds.
No, you raise a point that I think it's extremely important that we keep our heads really up and proud of Europe, because we are the flagship and the torchbearers of fundamental research. And so if you look at fundamental research all over the world, we have the best here in Europe. And that is because we had vision. I mean, I sometimes tell the story that the Large Hadron Collider exists in Switzerland, but it could have been in Texas. But in Texas at the time, they decided that at some point they didn't want to put public money to create a particle accelerator in Texas. And so it was created in Switzerland. And if you look at the value that the CERN has actually brought to society, it's huge, and that was public money. So we owe that to the Europeans to actually be able to keep investing in fundamental research, because that's the ingredient of everything. What we sometimes don't know how to do is that how to steer the ingredients to make the soup, because that's the missing link. And that comes to the ecosystem. And on the ecosystem, the missing link, when you look at innovation, you always see an ecosystem where you have a university at the middle, you have companies around it, and then you have financing. And I think that the missing link that we've been talking here about financing is just appalling. I mean, you look in 2013, In Europe, we raised 5 billion euros in venture capital. In the US, 26 billion. The average venture capital fund in Europe is 60 million. In the US, is 260 million. And so, I mean, something is wrong. And I remember myself, I lived in Boston in the years, the end of 1998, 1999. There was absolutely no biotech industry. And suddenly, 10 years later, there was all the venture capitalists that invest in biotech are in Boston, all the industries there, and if you want to do biotech, you go to Boston. And I think that there's one of the ideas that we're launching, which is a fund of funds, basically part of the Capital Markets Union, is about getting more private investment into venture capital. Because, I mean, one of the things that is quite scary is that you look at the numbers for Europe in terms of venture capital since 2008, and the size of the public investment has been growing. So there's a lot of public money in venture capital, and we are not attracting the private money. Because why? Because a lot of the venture capitalists, even the ones that are in Europe, prefer to go and invest in the US.
Yeah.
And so we really have a problem there. So I think that that is the missing link on the ecosystem. But absolutely, I mean, without that strength that we have in terms of fundamental research, we would not get there. But it's very sad when you meet people that have great ideas, they do fundamental research, and then when they get to the idea, they just, whoops, they go away. And we can't let that happen, because that's really a part of our job.
So perhaps a final round of last comments, but I wanted to ask a little... there's a question. Bernd.
Thanks very much. Bernd Halling from Bayer. Hope this works. We are all, I think, very happy to hear that we are all for innovation and we are all against nasty regulation which we cannot use. But we also know that if you really come to discussing legislation, often innovation as such is only a second or third thought. And I think Erika mentioned discussion on data protection. I think particularly the EPP has tried to defend it. I think the point of having a good balance between high data protection that we need, but also, I think, possibilities to do research and do business with the new data sets. And that's something I think we're obviously concerned, particularly doing research in the healthcare area, if the definition that parts discussed in the Parliament is very narrow and certain things cannot be done. So I'd like to get your ideas or comments on how can we ensure that the balance is right. And also in future, if we deal with legislation, we have a balance between innovation, but also with the other concerns that we need to deal with.
Thank you. Michal, would you like to give a response on...
You know, there were many reasons which caused that the final shape of the GDPR is as it is, also related to Snowden revelations and so on. But I think that we need to understand that during next some weeks, we need to put at the table some questions related to anonymization and new rules for sharing the data. We need to implement GDPR, but on the other hand, after that, we need to talk with all partners about implementation. It will be 2 years' time for implementation, and we need to start the debate in Europe on ownership of the data, who needs to have the power for controlling the data, who means individuals, yes, is data, our personal data, and business as data are produced the data, and scientists and so on and so on. So we need this discussion, of course, and I think that the final solution will be much more flexible than it looks like here, and also we need to implement the risk-based approach, because this is very important for the business, especially for the small business. Yes, this is the solution. And on the other hand, I would like to come back to your position, because, of course, we are talking about our European solution related to data and transferring the data, sharing, and so on. But we need some rules. I'm not saying convention. I'm not saying strong solutions. I'm saying rules all over the world, because internet is all over the world. Yeah? So we need to overcome those cross-border solutions. And our European flexible solution and agreement with the US will be a good reference point for data sharing for the future and for all of us. And if we are talking about innovation, the last point, this is important to commercialize the results of the researchers. Yes, and in my country, in Poland, we have started to make it some years ago. But I think that this is a problem. This is a huge problem, and we need some kind of brokering between science and business.
Can I add?
The debate is
First
getting up.
Commissioner.
No, ladies
Eva.
first, always.
Things very briefly, because something when we discuss innovation tends to be forgotten as an expression. We rarely talk about open innovation, and we can contribute so much to the economic ideas, to the inspiring ideas that the Martens Center is promoting through open innovation, and people that never thought that they can have their chip and their say into innovation and bring something up to Europe. That's how they can be part of this trial. It's very rarely discussed in the Parliament, and even more rarely discussed across Europe. So if we can do something to spread this debate, to make people aware of it, it can contribute to all these ideas being brought to life.
I just want a very quick, thank you very much for saying open innovation, because I was in the Parliament, I say that I have 3 O's, the open innovation, the open science, and the open to the world. And I just wanted to let you know, and you can quote me on that, that I've been from the very beginning fighting always for an exception in terms of data protection for research. And I will keep always my position. Of course, there's different grays and different positions in different people, but for me it will be extremely important to have that exception, because you have to be able to give access to data for researchers for the purpose of actually saving lives.
Yes.
And you're talking in terms of health, saving lives. And so you can discuss all the protection that you can give to data, but when you tell people that in terms of health you're talking about really finding solutions, people understand that. And so I am, and I always will be for a full, really exception in terms of the health sector. And you can always quote me on that. I don't know where we'll get. I think we'll get to a balanced solution, but I will keep going on actually as the Commissioner for Research, saying that that would be extremely important for Europe. And you see, I mean, it's like 90% of the data that we have today in the world was created in the last 2 years. So trying to stop this process is like putting a finger in a river and trying to stop the river. The river will not stop anyway. So whatever we do, we can do legislation, we can do discussions in the Parliament, but this is unstoppable, and rightly so, and I'm very happy that it's unstoppable.
You know, I think I would like to add one word also. It's responsibility, because I think our users or customers or citizens are more and more aware about how to control their data. And we're moving into a generation that has never knew that there was no computer before. When I was going to university, there was no computer. Okay, there was no email. But today it will be unimaginable. As Tomi was saying, my kid of 2 years old is better than my mother with my iPad. But the reality is that I think we need responsibility on 2 sides. We need responsibility for the companies to be transparent to what we do with the data of our users. And this is essential. You know, I think we have a corporate responsibility to play with that. But we also need a responsibility from policymakers to understand that the world is changing and the users are much more ready to know what they can do with their data or choose what they want their data to be used for. So I think there is a double game here. We need to be careful, and this is where Michal is right. We need rules, and we need to implement those rules. So when a company does something wrong, they need to be implemented. The rules need to be implemented. But we need to be careful of not touching the rest of the industry who is acting in a transparent way and in a responsible way. Because if not, we are going to block the evolution of a market only because there are few companies that are playing the bad game. And this is not fair. So implement the rules, hit the bad guys, but at the same time, let the companies that are transparent and try to be as much as possible respecting everything to play the game. Because this will be good for innovation. And it will be good for those small players. Because you see, big companies have lawyers. They can look at the law and implement. The startups, so the small players, the SMEs, they don't even have the capacity to read those rules. If it's complicated for companies like us, I imagine how much it is difficult for a company who has 10 players and who are inventing every day. And this is a challenge we need to see. But
Not
implementation is number one.
Not only clear vision, but also clear
Yeah.
application
the
of
rules.
what is being said. Have two last comments before I close, Thomas, and
two
then
comments, and so the first one indeed is implementation and actually enforcement and punishment. You do bad things, you're punished. In life, that's what happens. That's what we teach kids. The second thing is that actually you could even think about data stewardship in general as part of a CSR guideline for companies, as it is to not harm the environment, to have good labor policies. You could think about that in the future. That would be one of the things. You know, we all produce very strict, because we are under US law, it's very well defined, to produce CSR reports about what we do about the environment, you know, community service and others. We could think about data stewardship in general as a CSR requirement for companies to follow, and the bad ones, well, will go into the fray because it's the right thing to do.
yeah. So bringing it part of the kind of more paradigm shifts and also in the moral behavior
Yep,
of companies.
Just one example, mHealth, it's a very big challenge, and I think it will be very important for all of us as patients and so on. And we have started, and I think that through some months it will be finished, the work on code of conduct. This is the work between Commission, between organizations of patients and doctors, and also this is the strong participation of the business. And code of conduct will be much better for development of this area than a strong regulation without possibility to understand what will be through 2 years, for example. Code of conduct is easier to change when the technology will be changed.
Excellent. Eva, last comments before we're...
Thank you. There was something from the provocative remarks of Karim in the very beginning that I think got unanswered, and I want to comment on it, because I think both Michal and I are quite provocative when we are in the parliament and also able to criticize what we do and what our job is. But you said it's so difficult to change. We hear all the time how difficult it is to change. Well, if we continue to lay our backs on how difficult it is to change, especially on the topic of the digital revolution, well, we are in a real trouble. If we are all here representing not generation X or Y, if we do represent generation D, the digital generation, there's no way we can say it's so difficult to change. We need to act faster. When there's necessity to implement, we have to implement the rules that are out there, and there's no time for us to lose to say we cannot change. That's something that citizens don't expect, business doesn't expect from us, consumers don't expect. The earlier we realize that we need this new wave of leaders, the faster Europe gonna go back to its competitiveness. And probably next time you're not gonna invest $1 billion in France, but a couple of billions across Europe. But we need to show that we have that commitment. And it's difficult for political leaders to show this, but there are a number across Europe that have showed it. The more we have, the easier we're gonna faster change things.
Well, thank you very much.
Good
I know
conclusion.
that I wanted to thank the panel for this wonderful discussion that's been a bit provocative, and I'd like to summarize, of course, starting from the disruptive effect that the digital has had, and how can we do, and obviously the enormous opportunities that this is creating. 30 trillion euros is the vision of the size of the economy, and the need of how can Europe actually capitalize on this, and the need for a strong pipeline from research until the end product. All of a sudden it's the user, it's the client who's deciding what is needed. The need for speed of change, of the better regulation when it comes to how we deal with this, and also new ways of making sure that the ecosystem is healthy and we're creating a good vision through codes of conduct or other views. So I think there is a lot of elements here to build on. I wanted to thank the Martens Center for this wonderful opportunity, and everyone here. And I'd like to give the floor to Tomi Huhtanen to continue on from here. Oh, there you are.
Thank you, Erika. So, finally, we have come to the end of Economic Ideas Forum this year. We have 5 outstanding panels. issues which are important for Europe, for European Union, for the member states, for the EPP, and therefore for Martens Center. So thank you very much for all your contribution. And this will be reflected for sure in the work of the EPP, but especially in the Martens Center in our upcoming research. Now we had 5 panels, and I don't make you to suffer that I would go through the kind of main points to all the five debates what we had. But I would just maybe conclude on maybe one point. We started, as Karim mentioned, we started in Madrid. We went to this debate, London, Dublin, Helsinki, Bratislava, and finally now here in Brussels. And one could say that in these debates, actually, to be really honest, I think it's the first time that really the issue of financial and economic crisis, I think it was not mentioned at all. So that's also a sign that we have passed a certain phase. But what is also clear, I think, from the discussion, especially today, that we have not returned to past, but we have gone to something new, to a situation which dominates by change, disruption, adaptation. So it's the new world, and the question is really how do you adapt? And the question about the future, Thomas well pointed out about the point on you had your research section, and you just concluded that it was very difficult to predict what will come in the future. In fact, I can tell you, and now Owen, our economist, who is luckily away, he will hate me. But they made a study. They took actually 100 top economists, and they looked at future analysis, and to see how well they matched. And they realized that what really happened and what the economists, as an aggregate, said didn't correlate at all. The other study is actually that they also made same with the policy analyst, and actually it correlated negatively. But that's totally other. That's totally other story. So what to do then? And I think that has been pointed out many times, also by this panel. It's about the flexibility, to the readiness to change. And I think the question we have to ask ourselves is Europe doing that? Are we embracing that? And there I come to the final point. Here in Martens Center, for us, the key word is reform. Flexibility doesn't mean necessarily that it's a libertarian approach, but it's the capacity to take on the issues, the changes, and push the change. And for us, actually this is the end of the reform cycle. It's not anymore that you make a reforms and then you wait 7-8 years and then you see what you need to do. It's a constant effort. So I think we are the reformers. That's our point. With this, I would like to thank you, the audience. Many of you have been here during the whole day, the panelists, the commissioner. I would like to thank you very much, the Martens Center team. Excellent work. And I would like to thank AT&T, CCIA, Google, Uber, UPS, and Walt also as supporters of this initiative. And so, my final words, welcome to the next year's Economic Ideas Forum 2016, wherever it will be. But before that, welcome to cocktail. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.